Alright, so I'd like to talk a little bit about init systems. If you saw the process video, the last one, you might recall that there are three types of services. The second one I mentioned was daemons, and those are processes that start a service. Now, there are a lot of different types of, and I mentioned that, is that not going to open? I mentioned that those were started by System D. That is called an init system. Basically, what happens is System D is the process that starts all other processes. So you'll see it be PID 1 or process ID 1 because it's the first thing that starts so that it can start all of the other processes. Now, there are a lot of different types of units in this System D environment. The most important, in my experience, are the services and the sockets. And that's what I'm going to be talking about now. So there are some locations that these things are stored in. For example, oh wait, it's not varlib, it's userlib. My bad. And here we can see a lot of these services, and that's in userlib systemd system. Another place is etc systemd system. Alright, this is the sort of next place that they can that the services can be located, and one final is run systemd. There are also some services there. But real quick, let's write an example. Let's create an example service kind of to go over. How sort of the different things that go into creating a service. First, the unit. This is just going to be some basic stuff about this unit. As you recall, there are a bunch of different types of units. This is a service type as denoted by the file extension. And now we're going to define what this service will do. It's going to just run a simple example script that I've already defined. And then install is wanted. We're going to, for the install section, that's sort of how this unit is going to be implemented. The most common way is multi-user.target. I'm not going to get into target files now, but if you are going to be writing more complex services, you should look into that and sort of look into that a little more. But so if we go back home and just cat example, we can see basically all that's doing is echoing some words into a file. So how do we start a service? So we just do sudo systemctl start, and then the name of the service, which is example here. Then we can check the status by running status. As we can see, it deactivated successfully. That's because once the script finished, it just turned itself off, and as you can see, that happened in about a second. But so now if we cat, nope, not etc, systemd works, ls systemd, we can see it was written 050, 050. So the write time also lines up. So that's the basics of how you write an example service. Let's look at this VPN agent d.service. And as we can see, in a real one, there's going to be a lot of other options. Restart is one of them, so that's what happens when your service fails. It's going to restart, and then yeah. So what was I saying? Restart is one option that will just, your service doesn't quite know when to start over again. Well, on failure. So whenever you have a sort of failure in the process, it'll just restart the service. And that's just a sort of example of what a real one looks like, because this example.service isn't quite the same. So let's look at, again, starting a real service. So let's start SSHD and look at the status. So looking at this, we have a few things. First, we have the name of the service and then sort of the description. Then we have loaded, and back over here it says disabled in yellow, but it is active and running. So what disabled means and how it's different than active or running, because if something's disabled, you would think it wouldn't be able to run, but what that means is actually will it start on boot. So disabled and enabled are in reference to, if I reboot my computer now, will SSHD be running when it turns back on? The answer is no, because it is disabled, but it is running now. So if we want to enable SSHD, we just type enable SSHD, and then it will enable it. Check the status again, and we can see the service is enabled. So in order to disable it again, we just disable SSHD, and to stop it, we do that. And if we check the status, now we can see it's disabled and it's dead. One thing, there's a lot of log information here. One way we can look at sort of this log information in the file is with the journalctl command. The TACXE flags are commonly used. I would recommend just using them unless you have a reason not to. And we can read all of the log information. That's more helpful when it fails. So, for example, let's vim example, give it a reason to fail. Read only. Let's just take that out. Start example. Now it won't tell you, but there was an error. So as you can see, since description is misspelled, it will throw that error, and we can look at that further in journalctl. Now sometimes the reason why you can't just look at the status is because there's a lot more information. In this example, it's a simple error, a misspelled word. So it's not going to be that complicated, but in a more complicated situation, you would want to use journal CTL for that. So that is the basics of services. That is so a service is basically a process. A service is going to it's a process that will run typically on boot or when you manually define it. There is, like I said, also it's not var, it's user lib systemd system. Let's look at the telnet.socket. It'd help if I could spell. And we can see we can just see a different type of unit real quick. Here, the description, telnet server activation socket, and it gives you some documentation, so that's another option you can use in the unit sort of subheader. As you can see here, it says socket instead of service, and it says listen stream equals 23. And if I'm not mistaken, real quick, listen stream equals 23 will say more or less that telnet is listening on port 23. This syntax here actually is interesting because it is not exactly obvious, but that will be listening on IPv6 by default. In order to be listening on IPv4, you would have to put that syntax in. Now, I'm not certain why systemd decides to operate that way, but it does. And as you can see here, moving on one further step, the install section, it's no longer wanted by multi-user.target, but now it's sockets.target. So that is sort of the basics of socket. Service, just to reiterate, is a process running on the system, and a socket will be a network connection. So that is a basic overview of two of the different types of units in systemd, where you'll find a lot of these files, what a service and a socket is, how to manage services, and how to write your own if the need arises.